Donald Trump has disgraced himself and the United States with his recent post about Ukraine, so we're going to go through it and debunk the numerous falsehoods. He starts by saying, think of it, a modestly successful comedian, Volodymyr Zelensky, talked the United States of America into spending $350 billion. Already we have a lie. Even with the most expansive estimate of US Ukraine funding, it doesn't come even remotely close to $350 billion. As of September 30th, 2024, total US spending hovers right around $183 billion. But Trump continues to go into a war that couldn't be won, that never had to start, but a war that he, without the US and Trump, will never be able to settle. The United States has spent $200 billion more than Europe. But if our spending is only $183 billion, how could we have spent $200 billion more than Europe? Trump continues, and Europe's money is guaranteed, while the United States will get nothing back. Why didn't sleepy Joe Biden demand equalization in that this war is far more important to Europe than it is to us? We have a big, beautiful ocean as separation. On top of this, Zelensky admits that half of the money we sent him is missing. That is not true, and Zelensky has never said that. What Trump is most likely referring to is that on February 2nd, Zelensky said that Ukraine had only received $75 billion of the $175 billion that the United States had spent. The reason for this is not that it has been stolen, but that a huge chunk of Ukraine aid, and actually military aid in general, is spent domestically. Roughly 90% of military aid is spent in the United States. Of aid overall, roughly 60% is spent in the United States, about 25% is spent in Ukraine, and the final 15% is spent globally. Trump continues and says Zelensky refuses to have elections, is very low in Ukrainian polls, and the only thing he was good at was playing Biden like a fiddle. Now, it's really interesting Trump would say that Zelensky has a low approval rating, because according to the Kyiv International Institute of Sociology, Zelensky has an above 50% approval rating amongst Ukrainians. And according to 538, Donald Trump's approval rating amongst Americans is roughly 46.6%. This would mean Zelensky has a higher approval rating than Donald Trump. Trump also claims that Zelensky refuses to hold elections, which is just blatantly not true. Now, I have previously said that I would support if Ukraine had elections, but the lacking is not Zelensky's fault. Martial law was declared in Ukraine back in 2022, when there was a massive full-scale invasion of their country. Ukraine's relevant legislation on martial law is very clear that national elections will not be held during such time. Keep in mind, Zelensky was democratically elected back in 2019. This legislation surrounding martial law came into effect well before Zelensky was ever elected. Trump continues, a dictator without elections. Remember, when he says dictator, he is referring to a democratically elected leader with a higher approval rating than him. But he says a dictator without elections. Zelensky better move fast or he is not going to have a country left. In the meantime, we are successfully negotiating an end to the war with Russia. Interesting that he is so keen to call Zelensky a dictator, but doesn't seem to have any mention of Putin being one. He says something I'll admit only Trump and the Trump administration can do. He says Biden never tried, Europe has failed to bring peace, and Zelensky probably wants to keep the gravy train going. He closes and says, I love Ukraine, but Zelensky has done a terrible job, his country is shattered, and millions have unnecessarily died, and so it continues. Many innocent people have died, but to lay that at the feet of the country that has been invaded, that is supposed to be our ally, is despicable.